So hello and welcome to the sixth of these conversations that I'm having with Tony Hurl as he comes to the end of 28 years of ministry here at St. Paul's in St. Albans. We've talked about the early days here at St. Paul's and Tony's first impressions. We've talked about the work in the moving of the Spirit and the building project. And in the last of these conversations, I'm going to ask Tony some perhaps more general questions about his time and see what comes out of those. So my first question, Tony, is looking back over those 28 years, what would you pick out as, if you like, the significant highlights or the significant achievements as you retire from the church?
It's hard, isn't it? There are many. I mean, one of the things of being here 28 years, it sounds as though that's an awful long time, and yet it's been almost different churches as you've gone through different phases. So God has been in them. I think I'd love to have seen more, and I'd still love to see more. And yet that, Abraham died still looking for a city and sort of stuff. So there's that sort of right thing, but there's been lots and lots of good. So I think the early years, we saw the church grow a lot. I think we had amazing volunteers doing children's work. So in the 90s, we had over 100 kids. I can remember Francis Cates coming out of one service and saying, you've got a primary school here. So there was extraordinary work then. But obviously the stuff that we got from Toronto and down the years has grown later. But I think Oasis, which Lydia did, was again extraordinary and a sort of model of, I think, what a sort of home groups could be. Now, again, it was a slightly different era when the women were less likely to go back to work for a season. But they had, at one stage, 70 women there. And it had that sort of model where it drew people together. And so they were one group of 70, but they went into little groups. So you got the both of them. And it's interesting as we think of going forward, I'm wondering whether, Andre's thinking about small groups being the way the church comes back together, and whether you do a Zoom meeting of 25 and then split into smaller groups would be a way of reconstituting so that you're not just in a tiny group or a small group, but there's some cross links, because I do think everyone needs to be in small groups, and that's incredibly difficult with time pressures here. But there's also the sense of one family. So it's how you do those cross links of different things. And in some ways, a smaller, although it wasn't that small, a smaller church is easier in lots of ways, and everyone can know each other. So I didn't long to grow a bigger church as a bigger church. But what you do have is, if you live in St. Albans and people stick here, if you're going to, what is important, we go on evangelizing. And then, unless you have church splits or church plants, you need to grow the total number. And the problem with church planting here is that really there are enough churches in St. Albans. And so there wasn't obvious places to church plant. So HDB in London, there were lots of empty churches they could go into. And the difficulty of church planting, and it's one of the difficulties of a bigger church, is people tend to come to you sometimes from consumer reasons. And I'm very happy they come for that. But if you do church plants, you've got to be quite sacrificial. So if you send out, unless you do an elephant plant like HDB does, 100 plus people, and they send them out with a vicar, a curate, and a verger, don't they, as their system, then you do tend to get everything going. But they tend to focus on younger adults. They don't do children youth work. But if you do good children's youth work, good worship, actually then people sometimes don't want to go to places where that would be more provisional. And if you haven't got church buildings to plant into, if you're planting into community centres, then you often have got minimal rooms and things like that. So I didn't see church planting as a route here. So you grow, but as you grow, you don't get to know everyone so easily and all that sort of stuff. So there were wonderful periods of that period. I think Randy Clark was a really important stage for me of helping us as a team. We took all the staff members there, and it gave us a vision of seeing what it's like in that context. Now, it'll be different for each place, but I think that helped a lot of people have that name on the bus, as it were, in reality. I don't know that I've been as good at taking people with me as I could have been. And I think there was it's difficult in a ministry as to how much your vision means that you've got to keep that, and how much it's also done by everybody. So there's those sort of tensions as how you move things on. So for instance, I talked about worship, how you go from sort of creedal worship and to intimate worship, and how you pace that. I think you could think the same on children's work and youth work. I've said how I think the old Pathfinder and Cypher camps really worked on the basis that God might be a bit boring. So you did him really well in the evening, but you gave people lots of other stuff first. So it's how does God become intimacy with God and fun and joy and all that stuff. So there are those sort of movements. So how do you safeguard the vision but keep the people with you? So that was key.
What I'm hearing, what I'm trying to reflect back, you're talking in terms of growth, in terms of volunteers, in terms of moving on the style of the worship, and what you learned from Randy Clark from going to trips to Brazil. Are there other people who've come to the church who you think have had a significant impact during your time in terms of the ministry they brought to us?
I mean, all the way through, that has been a constant theme. So we had Steve Long, as I say, for a parish weekend, and I tried to get people for parish weekends. But Jo Moody, I met in Brazil, and she has this amazing testimony because she was ill for many years with huge pain from damage to her body through the birth of her son and bad birth. And she was miraculously healed at a Randy Clark meeting at their conference. And she's then released in ministry. And she's got this amazing combination, I think, of leading with love, because that's really critical, but but the power of the Spirit. So she formed, I mean, Randy, she's a minister ordained by Randy, and he thinks highly of her ministry. So she now has a ministry called Agape Freedom Fighters, and I'm a bit of a part of that. And we were the first international venue we went to, so we have a special place in her heart, and it's just wonderful to see her ministry. And
what do you think that she brings to St Paul's, Tony?
She brings a lot of wisdom. She has got an amazing breadth. So she does leadership training for our team. She's got real wisdom as to how to take teams forward, because that area, I didn't say how we grew a team. When we'd done the building project, we'd started before that with a youth minister, but the phase since then has been building a team. And that's been all sorts of sort of diverting work, really, of management stuff, of getting databases and systems working, staff handbooks, all that stuff you have to think of. But I think she's helped team leadership work, so she comes with that sort of wisdom. So she's this mix of natural and supernatural in a very easy, I think, accessible and wise. So I don't find there's anything that Randy says or Jo says which I feel I would want to apologise for. Whereas there are other times when you think, oh, I'm glad St Paul's isn't listening in on this, because I'm not sure I would quite agree with it, you know. And I'm sure they say things about that for us, but it sort of fitted very well. She brings a team. And one of the advantages going on Randy Clark's team is you see Randy Clark, but you also see the other people on the team and gain from them. And I think the wonderful way is also how it affects the world. So I was privileged to be with Randy Clark on the team when he was awarded by the mayor of Rio a medal, the highest medal that they could get, for his services to the city because of his healing ministry. And so I was made a missario of Brazil. So if I ever need a visa, I've got this certificate apparently, which will get me through without a visa, you know, get me through the visa process.
Other highlights you'd want to pick out, Tony?
I think it's seeing people grow and seeing people enabled. So one of the wonderful things is seeing the mission links we've got. And I think of Andrew Leake coming here, and then the links between people like Jim and Luca and others advising him, and that all fitting together to help in Argentina. And it's lovely that that's happened over coffee. I think of Luca and Jim doing stuff in Eastern Europe. So the way that we've got links now with the worldwide church, and they are doing God's work across the world, I think is wonderful. I think the links we've got in the church is wonderful too around here. So when I came, about a week after I came, someone came to me about Open Door, and we got together as some of the churches. And there was Michael Behensky, who was a wonderful Baptist minister at Dagnall Street. And there was a time when we set up lots of community things which were run largely by Christians, and they spun off. So Open Door isn't a church link as such, but nonetheless, if you took the Christians out of it, I think a lot would collapse. But it came from an initiative of the churches and then was embraced by the council. Things like the credit union was done by the Roman Catholic Church. Things like Emmaus was led by the Abbey. So furniture recycling, CTS counselling scheme, there were lots of them, and that was a way in which we affected the city. And to say, what bit do we do? So living rooms come in for addictions, Vineyard does feed, we do CAP, is a way that you work together. So I love to see the church thrive of a city, and I've invested quite a lot in being friends with other ministers and the church leaders. It was privileged to be rural dean, and in that time we did it with the church leaders. So we met together and we had a chapter as a half an hour at the end, but we did things as that. So there are those ways of seeing the whole city grow and playing our part in it.
What about your frustrations, Tony? What would you like to have done and haven't been able to achieve?
I think they lie round. I'm learning still about listening to God better, and I think the stuff I'm now sort of accessing a bit on emotions, because I think as English people we're not very good with our emotions, and it's just been a bit of a revelation to me how the kingdom of God is so emotional, and I've seen that at Gethsemane for years. But just thinking recently about Jesus doing so many of his miracles when a wave of compassion went through him. And I think I'm not very well set up to receive waves of compassion. So although I do have a compassionate heart, I think there's that sort of power surge, and also presumably the anger which went through for the clearing out the money changers. That am I emotionally free? So I think for myself, I long to grow in that, but I also long for the church to grow in it. I think our greatest danger here is that we operate out of our human capacities. God shaped, but nonetheless our humanness rather than spirit stuff. And I've often said to people when people come around and choose a church, that is God the chairman of the board, or is he a valued non-executive director? You know, are you saying I need this, this and this, or are you saying, God, where do you want to send me? What do you want me to do? So I long for us to do more. I think going forward, Andy Pike is in a good position to do the wellness stuff, but I long for Christians to be well so that we can lay ourselves down in loving service. So it's not that it's risk-free. So our service may well be costly. We could well, if we serve people in this virus stakes, we could well catch the virus if we serve people properly. I don't think it's about our safety that's the key thing. It's our being well to serve and give our lives in service. And that's where the listen, enjoy, do it comes.
And your plans for retirement, Tony, what have you got to plan?
It's really funny because it feels the right time for me to leave, but I really don't know what will happen afterwards. So I feel as though that's fine. So I'm happy to leave it with God. We're moving to London. We're trying to sort out the house there. We were seeing someone yesterday about that. Our son and daughter-in-law live down there, so they'll be within a mile. And we've got 4 grandchildren, 3 or under. So we look forward to seeing that. And our new garage, which is a sort of funny shape, has got space for a table tennis table. So I think family will be a part of it. I'm hoping to grow in this freedom and growth myself. And I see sort of links with Agape. No doubt we're linking with the church there, but there are 5 churches near us. 4 of them are sort of linked to New Wine because they're all they're sort of Mark Mellish in various incarnations, as it were. One's closed, but he might reopen, I think. So I don't know quite what it will be. I will be a normal. The road we're in has got quite a community in it, and our tenants have moved just down the road, 8 doors down. So we'll be in that community, and I feel long term that the church is to just live well in the world more than expect people to come to church. So I wonder whether that won't be a feature. But I don't know. But I feel that God's got his hand on us. There's time to sort of grow and play. And one of my learnings recently has been I tend to be faithful and a steward and responsible. I come up on those. So I tend to take on to myself, and I think work has often been, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And I don't think I find it easy then to be prophetic into that. So you tend to add the prophetic on top of that. So it'd be interesting not to have an agenda. And Lydia and I would like to spend sort of mornings with God, and possibly doing these Randy Clark courses. Lydia's learning Hebrew. That's been a good experience, and she has the local Masorti baptism teacher teaching her, and she's done 3 or 4 years with the Hebrew University, so she's getting actually quite good at Hebrew now. So there are interesting sort of conversations on that.
Well, Tony, it's been fascinating to have these conversations with you over this. This is number 6, and all of them have taught me so much and given me different insights into you, into your ministry, how the Holy Spirit has led you, and also how different parts of your ministry have sort of fed into other parts as you've been guided by God. And I know you're not leaving us yet, but I will, on behalf of all the church, want to just thank you for all you've given, for all you and Lydia have given, and all you've done at St. Paul's over those many years, and wish you a very happy, when it comes, a very happy and joyous retirement.
Thank you. And perhaps just to say to us, I also want to say peace to all those who I've offended or hurt during the years. It's hard not to do that, and I've not been far from perfect, but I pray blessing on everyone and on this church going forward as well. Thank you.